Y'all, they've been lying. Just watch this video.
People were already here. Does it make sense to go all the way to this other continent to bring people on a boat when we know that half of your stock is gonna die? You wouldn't do that. So
let me close my blinds because this about to get deep. I've been really thinking about this. It do not make sense to go all the way to another place to look for slaves when it's already people here. So if they enslaved the people here and the slaves were melanated black, the Native Americans are the black people. Okay, so when Chris first came to the Caribbean and he stole some natives, which is in South America, in his journal he mentioned that Native Americans were black-skinned people. A voyager even said the Indians are very dark-complected, approaching black people. They have large lips, broad, flat, black-like nose, bearing strong resemblance to black people. It also said they had long, straight hair, so there's your evidence. Published by Vogue. So now I'm just thinking, who are these people? There is a lot of talk that they are descended from Mongolian people. I'm not gonna lie, it do look similar. Now there was also this situation called the $5 Indian, when people paid $5 to falsify documents declaring them Native Americans to reap the benefits. And then what they did with us, dark-skinned indigenous people who were called Indians or Indos, because they were dark, the United States legally unlawfully classified each as Negro. So they changed our ethnicity and said all of us was just Africans. This is a picture of a postcard of an American person back then. Now before Caucasian people came, we all know specific tribes were beefing with each other. Now what if the Mongolian people teamed up with the colonists, and because we was beefing to help enslave us, then they had a Thanksgiving to celebrate, and they end up getting backstabbed too and outcasted to the West. There is evidence all around North and South America that black people were here. So tell me what y'all think. Stay dangerous.
Oh dear, no. Let me help you out here since African history is not taught in North America. There were many expeditions from Africa to the Americas, and the most famous one was executed by Mansa Abu Bakr II, the ruler of the Mali Empire. He believed there was a world beyond the ocean, so he called to his best minds to build a fleet of ships, and he sent 200 ships to look for the new world. There was enough food and water rations to last for 2 years, and he told them, don't come back till you reach the end of the ocean or till you run out of food and water. One ship came back, and the people aboard that ship told Mansa Abu Bakr II that all the other ships went into a river current and they disappeared out of sight, so they decided to come back. Mansa Abu Bakr took that as a sign that there was a land there. So in 1311, Mansa prepared 1,000 ships and put men aboard that ship. He prepared an additional 1,000 ships full of supplies and gold, total of 2,000 ships. On the second expedition, Mansa Abu Bakr II went with his crew, but he never came back. The thing is, there is no written account of his arrival. However, there is significant evidence suggesting that him and his crew did arrive in the Americas. In fact, Christopher Columbus himself wrote, based on the account of the indigenous Americans, they said, black-skinned people had come from the southeast in boats trading in gold-tipped spears. The indigenous Americans called this gold spearhead guanine, which is actually an African word, a Mandinkan word which means gold. That was the language that was spoken in the Mali Empire, which is located right here in West Africa. When Africans set out to explore the New World, they didn't go there with the intention to colonize. They already had a lot of gold. Mansa Abu Bakr II went there with sailors, builders, thinkers, artists, traders. I think Mansa Abu Bakr II was vibing with the indigenous Americans that he decided not to come back. Mansa Abu Bakr II had no reason to come back as he trusted his successor, Mansa Musa, which is another good story. Fun fact, Mansa Musa is the richest person in history and nobody beat his record yet. The magazine described Mansa Musa's wealth as richer than anyone could describe. Another magazine noted wealth incalculable. So yeah, the Malis and the indigenous Americans were vibing, but black people are not native to the Americas. Let's talk about the richest person in history. This is Mansa Musa. Most people have never heard of him. Mansa means ruler or king, and Musa is his name. He was the ruler of the Mali Empire during the 14th century, and he came into power kind of by accident. His brother went on a voyage expeditions through the Atlantic Ocean and never came back. The empire he inherited was already wealthy, but he became wealthier through conquest, annexing important cities, and securing the most valuable trade routes in Africa. He had control of more than 50% of the gold that were being traded at the time. And salt. Salt was very valuable at the time too. Even today, 50% of the gold that's being traded came from 3 Mali gold mines. That wasn't his only legacy. When he annexed the city of Timbuktu, he made it into an educational center, building universities, libraries, and the best minds from the Middle East and Africa used to travel there to study. In fact, much of the structures he built still stands today. Sadly, some of his libraries were burnt, much like what happened around the world, but the good thing is many of his manuscripts are still around. They're being studied and translated right now. And if you heard me say Timbuktu, that's a real place, not some mythical isolated place in the middle of nowhere. Mansa Musa is most famous for his extravagant pilgrimage travel to the city of Mecca. He wanted to travel from Timbuktu to Mecca, and he said, I'm gonna do it in style. So he had an entourage of tens of thousands of people carrying caravans of gold through the Sahara Desert. He was a very generous person. He would give out gold and food to everyone on his routes. He built a few mosques on the way to Mecca. In fact, when he was in the city of Cairo, Egypt, he gave out so much gold, it crashed the economy in Cairo for a decade. 10 years! His entourage was huge. It went on for kilometers on end. The tales of that pilgrimage landed him on the Catalana Atlas, the most important world medieval map we have today. He was depicted on this map holding a golden orb. His wealth was estimated at $400 billion in today's money, and that's a conservative estimate.
Where are all the slave ships? I mean, they have every other type of ship in a museum, so why don't we have any museums with slave ships in them? With love and light, here's the answer. And we're going to combine some history, some context, and some common sense. So here we go. The short answer is that slave ships weren't built to last 500 years, nor were they preserved once they were retired. Because by that time, the folks who were importing slaves found something else to import. So there are people who are using this as evidence that the transatlantic slave trade didn't happen. And that's just not true. The Middle Passage is very well documented. And if we're thinking in history in terms of the U.S., the last known slave ship to import Africans to America for the purpose of chattel slavery docked in 1860, and it was called the Clotilda. Now, we know that emancipation happened within 10 years of the Clotilda docking, but there's something that happened in 1808, about 60 years prior, that a lot of people don't know about. And that's called the Act Prohibiting the Importation of Slaves. Now, that act was passed in 1808. And what happened essentially was at the Constitutional Convention, the Founding Fathers argued about slavery the way that they've been arguing about slavery since the American Revolution. And the compromise they came to was that the North was like, okay, South, y'all can keep your slaves that you already have, but you can't import any new ones. But Cheyenne, you just said the Clotilda docked in 1860. Y'all, they were sneaking us in. Now we know if there's one thing history's taught us is that white folks don't like the government messing with their money. And there were whole companies who did nothing but import human chattel. So you think they just stopped overnight? No. They continued. They continued to import human chattel and use the guise of those other goods that they were shipping as cover. And it's very well documented. I implore you to go look it up. But essentially what would happen was, if those ships were found off the coast of the USA and they had slaves on them, what they would do was set the ship on fire and let it burn. Or they'd chain up all the Africans and literally push them off the side so they drowned by the time they got to shore. And they just figured, screw it, we'll just take the loss. And if you look at records from that time, you'll see that a lot of them are incomplete or written in code. And if that sounds absolutely horrific, it's because it was. If you get a chance, I recommend reading this book. It's Barracoon by Zora Neale Hurston. The foreword is by Alex Walker. It's a great book. But it tells of the story of the last black cargo in his own words, in Cujo's own words. But yeah, those ships simply weren't saved because they weren't deemed as important enough to save. And the companies and agencies that use them just use them for other stuff or docked them and let them rot away. If you want more information, the Smithsonian is actually conducting a project. It's called the Slave Wrecks Project, where they go try and look for those boats. But yeah, that's what happened.